What's going on, beautiful people? This is Coaching with Mr. Adam, and we are back again for our second mental health segment. It is Wednesday, and this happens every Wednesday. And you know what it is? We do a 10, 15-minute segment. We have a theme. But before we jump into all of that, of course, we give you your 1 minute. And this 1 minute represents you. This is your minute. This is not my minute. This is not Miss Daisy's minute. This minute belongs to you. Take this minute for whatever you want to do for it. If you want to hold yourself, hug yourself, if you want to think of someone you miss, love, whatever it is, do what you need to do for this minute and then come right back into this room so that you can get some of this goodness from me and Miss Daisy. So we're going to take this minute real quick here, starting now. All right. And we are back. Thank you for having that minute with us. Thank you for taking that minute for yourself. We're back again. Me and Miss Daisy, the amazing therapist from Chicago, representing. And what we're going to do today, last episode, we talked about putting yourself first. Today, we are talking about self-care and soul care. I want to give these definitions real quick. And obviously, Ms. Daisy, I know we're going to chop this up and break it down. But for the first one, self-care, the practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's health or mind. The soul care is support and restore of well-being of persons in their totality. That is mind, body, and spirit. Those are the two definitions. I sound weird saying them because I don't resonate with these definitions, but what I want to do is just discuss them. So let's go one by one, Miss Daisy, if you're cool with it. And I'm just chopping at the bits to hear what you want to talk about on this one. But are you cool? Let's start with the amazing word, the most popular word nowadays, self-care. What are your thoughts?
Well, what are my honest thoughts about it? I think self-care started out very intentionally as a benefit for everyone, and then society just took it and commercialized it so much that it starts to lose its meaning. However, it's a really good addition. So I think about self-care as day-to-day stuff. What do we need to get through the week? What do we need to get to the end of the day? That's what I think about self-care, right? Yeah. I think about it in its immediacy, right? So when we think about immediacy, it's what's happening right now. That's what I think about self-care. I think self-care can be hard. It can be different depending on what somebody's beliefs are, what somebody's allowed to have for their day. But it is generally about taking care of ourselves so that way we can get through the things that we need to get through.
For sure. You know, I love what you said in the beginning there, and I would love to just dive in on that one a little bit, the intentionality of the word and the movement, right? Because unfortunately, you don't want some of these things that can be so powerful and empowering to become a Hallmark holiday, right? All of a sudden, we're going to have self-care day. Wait, it's going to be set on the calendar kind of deal, and I feel like it loses its real a texture of meaning. And you know, when I think of it, and I love what you said, it's right now. And I totally agree with you. When I think of self-care, I think of it as it's an individual thing of what it represents to you, what self-care is for you, right? Because for me, self-care is walking in the woods, but I know a friend of mine, self-care is going to the woods is the opposite of self-care for them,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So in saying that, right, knowing that self-care and that piece of the way it's been used, I guess in your view, and more speaking in your profession as a therapist, I guess what are your, you know, you shared a little bit of like, you know, how the intentionality of it came out strong out the gate, and now it's, you know, it's maybe misused, right? It's not handled in a correct way, or whichever way you want to kind of put it. But I guess for you, what are some of the common themes you're seeing with that misuse of self-care and maybe losing the real meaning of it?
Sure. I think, there has to be an authenticity attached to self-care, the way we take care of ourselves, the way we take care of our environment. And
Yeah.
some of the ways that self-care is being misused is in the workplace. I see it a lot in the workplace where self-care is very important, and it's hard to tell when there's authenticity behind it versus wanting to go around accountability. And before everybody starts jumping at me, these are real things that are happening, and people tend to use self-care for the wrong reasons, and that takes away the meaning of what it's supposed to be for someone. So I think
Mm.
when we're thinking about self-care, we have to think about it as an individualized experience about what someone needs in that moment versus over time.
You know what? Yes, I so agree with you, and unfortunately, I think sometimes people might capture it in you know, the lack of intentional way, meaning the way that we're talking about that doesn't seem so right. They almost grab that view and just kind of make it wide for themselves, kind of deal. I guess in self care and just the movement of self care, and as a therapist, and me as a coach, as a life coach, how do we get that word back to an empowerment space, right? How do we bring it back to its original roots? Because you know, self care, that's something I advocate a lot with my clients. That's something I advocate a lot with my friends and family. When I run events, it's a big part of it. The Who's Helping You Heal is all about self care, right? So you know, and this is more of like, you know, the hopeless, trying to be hopeful. What can we do to empower this word again? How can we bring it back? How can we give it that meaning again that you and I identify that is kind of like missing?
Sure. I like to reframe it as, what do you need right now? Right? So kind of asking people, that are going through something, if I'm in a conversation with someone, whether it's a work related conversation or a client conversation, I usually ask them, like, knowing what's happening for you, what is it that you need right now? What do you need from me? What do you need from yourself? Right. And that's how I try to reframe the word self-care, because self-care itself, it also becomes like a trigger word, right? So depending on someone's life, someone's if they're really busy, if they have a lot of really heavy responsibility, the word self-care can come with anxiety.
You are so right. I love that, you know, kind of what do you need right now, right? That speaks to the right now piece. And when you were speaking your original kind of like definition, your own perspective of it, it really spoke to just like self care is right now. Like, right, we're doing that right now. What do you need right now? And it kind of reminds me of something I shared with my wife, who's a kindergarten teacher, about the three H's. Do you need to be hugged, heard, or helped?
Mhm.
Right? It's those three words. It's not like what's your problem? What are you going through here, right? But it's running through the levels that maybe that age, that development of age needs those three things, right? So in saying that, how do we do that? How do we package that? What we do with kindergarten and do it with adults, right? Like how do we, you know, we have like a minute left here for self-care, but how do we package that and make sure that it is something that is productive, it is proactive, It's not one of those things that does trigger, right? And and I know I'm probably asking you to give me the golden wand, right? Like, I guess share with me on your thoughts with that one.
I mean, I like to package it as asking yourself like what's happening.
Mm,
Like I I can't emphasize reflection enough. Like what is happening? Is something happening for you right now where you need 5 minutes and we maybe need to take a break for 5 minutes and come back to this? Or do you need 5 minutes somewhere else? Like what is happening to you? I think about it as so when you're talking to somebody with complex trauma, right? You want to
yes,
be very intentional on asking them like what is happening? You know, what are your experiences, right? So that way they don't feel overwhelmed by what the expectations of the word self-care are, you know, what that
yeah,
is.
for sure. Maybe the adults do need the three H's.
I mean, sometimes they do, and maybe it's not a literal hug, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Maybe it's not literal, but maybe it is represented in our interactions, how we engage with someone, right?
For sure. Yeah. Well, let's move on. We touched on the self care piece, soul care, right? And this one, I'm conflicted with the definition. It bothers me a little bit. Not bother
Well,
me in a bad way, just kind of like it doesn't resonate for me.
sure.
And last time you gave your, your initial definition. I'd love to give you mine before you give yours with this one.
Mhm.
And it's more of a memory when I think of it, right? And you know this because you're a dear friend of mine. When my mother transitioned, I really went into a soul care place. It was a place that people can visit me in, but it was just a visit. They couldn't stay there with me, right? So when I think of soul care, I always think of like the deepest depths of your soul where no one can go. And it's hard to describe to others what it is because it's so deep. And that work, the renovation is like we're cracking the foundation on this bad boy. Like there's new foundation, right? And that's kind of how I define it. When I hashtag soul care in some of my posts, that's what I'm meaning. When I another connection will be a long hike, right? Going on hikes. I'm a hiker. I love doing it. That is soul care for me, right? Because sometimes I don't want to do 5 miles, but soul care gets me through it because I want that soul care, right? So I pass it to you, Miss Daisy. For you, soul care, your definition, what it represents for you. Love to hear that.
Yeah, I think soul care is more of an internalized exploration of ourselves and what we need. I think of it more as wellness. I think of it more as a journey that we're on, right? So when we look at what is happening in our soul, I think we're looking back at our basic needs, our psychological needs. So when we think about human behavior, we have psychological needs that we have to have met in order for us to feel that wellness and be able to get to that next step of self-actualization, right? So when we're
Yeah.
thinking about love, safety, right? We're thinking about all of that. That's for me is what soul care is how are we nourishing ourselves? How are we giving ourselves the vitamins and the nutrients in order to do the things that we have to do?
Yeah, you dropping some gems. I hope people are listening to Miss Daisy. She's dropping some gems on y'all. Before we hopped in our room or before we started recording, like me and you were just having a great conversation, and you mentioned like the timeline, the soul care timeline, right? So that to me, when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, self care is right now, immediate. Soul care, there's longevity involved with that one,
Yes.
right? So here's a question for you, Ms. Daisy. If I am someone who doesn't know whether I am in a self-care mode or so, like I'm figuring out which one is it that I need, right?
Mhm.
I guess how do they navigate that, right? Like, where do if I'm struggling with, I think, Daisy, I think I need self-care, but my soul care is calling me, right? Is it both that's calling me? Am I just stuck? Am I going crazy?
Yeah, I was going to say, why do you have to choose?
Okay, tell me that. Come on, break it down.
So I think we often feel like we have to make these choices in our lives, but I think one supports the other. If you're able to do self-care for the immediate needs, then that allows you more space towards the soul care. And if you're able to get the soul care to a point where you feel healthy, happy, and content, then the self-care comes a lot easier. So I don't think someone has to choose. I think there could be both and there needs to be room for both.
For sure. So you kind of look at it, or when you were speaking of it, Miss Daisy, I almost visualize it as the hand in hand gesture, right? Like,
Yes, it supports. Yes,
yes,
they
yeah,
support
okay,
each other. Yeah, they
yeah,
support each other.
yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of the like, going back to the soul care, because between the two, I practice both. So I'll say that, people, I practice both. Coach, you and Mr. Adam practice both, but soul care resonates more with me. Maybe because of the deeper work that I do on myself, right? Um, but I also know that sometimes that deep work might make us a little lost in the woods, right? So, and self care. It go, we spoke a little bit about it last week in our episode of like, when it goes to the extreme of things, right? So with soul care and self care, is there an extreme to that, in your opinion?
Well, I think when we when we practice soul care, we have to understand that we have to adjust our expectations for that. We have to be very realistic, right? It's not like a goal that we're going to set and it's going to be done and we're never going to think about it again. It's something that happens all the time. And it's something that also has to have flexibility. So I think about the flexibility that you need in your own life, in my life, to be able to feel good about the things that we're doing, right? So that soul care, I think, needs flexibility. And I don't, if it goes to an extreme, then I think if it's benefiting you and those things are protective factors and you're building like your protective factor toolbox, right? The things that's in your life that supports you, then I don't see anything wrong with it.
But, I guess love all that, Miss Daisy. Love what you're saying there, and I agree with you. I believe the two are that hand in hand support. They complement one another, and I love that you challenge me in in the sense of like, do you need to choose, right? And sometimes I think the human mind just kind of falls into that almost crossroads mentality. Here's a
Yeah.
crossroads. I got to go right or left, right?
Yeah.
And really, sometimes we create those own crossroads ourselves. So,
Too.
you know, moving into like some tangible pieces here and some tangible resources. Um, we'll start with self care real quick. What's the 1-2 punch for self care and some tangible thoughts on that one?
For self-care, I like to know what I'm doing and have like a literal reference. So I think self-care too can involve a lot of journaling, a lot of writing things down, whether they're complete thoughts, incomplete thoughts, whether it's a post-it somewhere in a book, being able
Mm-hmm.
to have something that you can go back and reflect on, I think is good. I am a big component of transition times. So whether you're coming home from work and you, like I said, you need that 5 minutes in the car, or if you have a different role happening after, you have your work and then you have your other role, take a shower, do something, right? Do something to separate that time and give yourself a few minutes in between. So transition times, I'm always big on that. Music, as you know, you love music, I
Yep.
love music. What is the
Mm-hmm.
playlist that you need for
Yep.
whatever it is that's happening? Is there a playlist to drive to work, a different one to drive home, right? What
Yep.
is how is music acting as a therapy for us in those
Um,
moments, right? So I look at those things too.
no, I love those. I love those too. And yeah, music, obviously being a universal language, one of those things that I make intentional playlists for myself. If I need motivation, I got a motivational list, right? If I want to just reflect, on loved ones, I got that list too. So you're so right. I will also, just to add a third punch, it's just the food that benefits your body. Like, what the food that you eat that benefits your body. Because I feel
Yeah, and
so
that was part
sometimes.
that.
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say that's part of the soul care too, right? So when I
It
say, why
is
do you have to choose? That could be part of the soul care.
for sure, for sure. Tangible one-two punch for soul care. What are your thoughts there, Miss Daisy?
Health, medical health, I think is
Okay.
really important. And then um, just your mental health, right? So thinking about medical health and mental health. So for medical health, you could be asking yourself why you can't get through the day. Why am I tired by 11 o'clock? There are things that
Yeah.
are happening in your body that you don't know about unless you go to the doctor
Mhm.
and you figure it out, right? A simple blood test. I'm always going to be an advocate for that, right?
Okay.
Especially as we get older and we try to work the same amount of hours that we did when we were younger, right? So we have to look
Sure.
at the medical of what's happening for us. And mental
Yeah,
health, the mental health is going to have us engage in those grounding activities, right? You
that's right.
mentioned going on walks and being to surround yourself with nature. So being intentional about some of the things that we can do as a routine in our life so that way we can be better connected to ourselves.
For sure. No, I love all that. And I think, with these self-care, soul care piece, even the putting yourself first, right? These themes that all go back to self, right? There's this theme of self that you and I are doing here and sharing these gems with folks. And in saying that, I think I love all the things you shared around self-care, the practices, the things that you need to do, the right now, that's right now, right? The intentional timeline of soul care and being able to give it a little more longevity. But also if you're listening to this video and checking us out, which I hope you are, and you're going through the split thoughts, like Daisy says, why you gotta choose? Like, stop
Mhm.
creating your own crossroad here. Like, there's still a middle trail there. And if there isn't, you can make it yourself, right? You can blaze that trail, whatever that is for yourself. So, in saying that, one, I want to thank you, Miss Daisy, for coming through and blessing the people and my platform again. You are always on point with your gems and the things that you share with folks. We're going to get more information on Daisy. That's why I'm holding a little back here. We're going to see her more often on the segments that we share here. But I just want to give you gratitude for just having this conversation with me, giving some tangible thoughts and resources to the folks who are listening. So I want to give you the final words here, like I did the last video, and we will end this segment.
Yeah, I think my final words is that if you have goals or things that you want to do in your life, remember you have to take care of yourself now in the present moment in order to even be able to get to that in the future.
All right. You heard that. Take care of yourself now. Why are you waiting? I mean, like, right
Right.
now, especially if
Right
it's that self-care, right? But if it's that self-care, as Miss Daisy just said, there's a timeline involved. There's some longevity in there. There's some intentionality that you need to put your time into that and not give up. Not give up. So thank you all for being here. This is Coaching with Mr. Adam, mental health segment every Wednesday, and we will see you next week. Peace, people.